Good morning. I am Kevin Price. Delighted to be with you. Talking to you about you and your business. Got a lot to talk about on today's program. I'm going to start off with my good friend, Tony Powers. He is a phenomenal radio personality in his own right. He's with the iTalk US radio network, italkus.com. Plus, he does a phenomenal show out there in the great state of South Carolina, right?
Georgia and South Carolina.
That's correct.
Right on the border.
Right there on the border. And do a great job of keeping people informed and what's going on. And that's a good way to start today. What is going on?
Well, the president's got a pen and he's got a phone, and I guess now we don't need Congress. I think it's just wonderful. We can just change government completely. Forget the Constitution. Let's just have an imperial president.
You know, it's so funny you should say that. I just talked about this on the show this week. I said, you got the FBI. We're not going to investigate the IRS. Why don't they just consolidate all these agencies? Because one of the reasons why those agencies were separate was in order to keep an eye on one another. But obviously, we're not going to do that. And, meanwhile, if Congress is just going to, scratch its belly and say, we wish you wouldn't do that, but not anything else, and not fulfill its constitutional mandate, and have hearings, who cares if the Senate's not going to impeach? They have a responsibility to impeach in the House. This is why Boehner's been in constant trouble since he's been Speaker of the House. But he's not going to do that role. Why don't we just consolidate that in the Supreme Court, which really used to have all the muscle, I thought, for a while? It's become a joke.
Now that we're down to presidential decree, we don't need an EPA. We don't need an FBI. We don't need an NSA. We just need the president. He can just sign executive orders and tell everybody what to do. And we Americans and we the people will just follow blindly and listen to the mainstream media that are going to tell us his story and not actually question anything like, the IRS, they were targeting Tea Party groups, but that's not a real story. Let's concentrate on a bridge over troubled waters in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Why should we concern ourselves with this little presidential proclamation where he's going to just now run the country by himself?
It's about time someone took over.
Yeah. Well, it is getting kind of frightening, Kevin. I'll tell you, when I saw that the other day, I was like, we've known this guy has been doing this for a long time. He does it with immigration. He does it with his own law, Obamacare, that was supposed to be the law of the land, and the Republicans couldn't touch it. We'll shut down the government if you even try. And so they did that. And then the president just goes by willy-nilly through executive order and changes it himself.
Yep.
And nobody holds him accountable.
How do you see this panning out? I mean, the Republicans couldn't be, more impotent. In my opinion, they're laughable. They're a laughing stock. Darrell Issa, the chief laughing stock. I remember, getting kind of chills, up and down my leg to pull a terminology that the left used to describe Obama at the prospect of this rough and tough Darrell Issa going after this administration and finally holding him accountable when he became chairman, of House Oversight in 2011. He has been a joke.
Well, it is a joke. And the sad thing is you're absolutely right. The Republicans, at least the establishment Republicans, are just totally impotent. They're not going to do anything. The mantra we hear from them is, just help us win the Senate in 2014, and then maybe if we win the presidency in 2016, we can do something. In the meantime, I guess Americans are just supposed to live under this dictator, and we're just supposed to fall in line and do what he says, and that's it.
I want people to lead who don't care about what other people are going to do. They're going to do what is right to them. And so when John Boehner swears to defend the Constitution but fails to defend it, because from day one in 2001, Obama had accumulated in 2 years more than any president up to that point of impeachable offenses. From 2008 to 2010, he already had plenty there. He already done Fast and Furious. He already had plenty of things lined up to go after this guy, and he didn't do it. And now every year, every time he becomes critical, it's laughable. It's a joke. So what? So you don't like it. Who does? Who does and who cares?
Well, he has a fellow dictator over in the Senate, Harry Reid, who wasn't afraid to drop that nuclear option, so he's going to stack the courts with left-leaning progressive judges that are going to have lifetime appointments. We're going to see him stack all of the federal agencies with his appointees, and the Republicans actually are just impotent to do anything about it. And they, sadly, won't go out in front of the cameras and talk and to the media. I don't know how much the media would pay attention even if they did, but they don't even bother.
Yeah.
And it's frightening. It really is frightening.
So, and it's funny you should say that. My good friend Steve Stockman, congressman here running against John Cornyn. And, of course, the left called Ted Cruz an absolute madman, and now they're saying that Steve Stockman is no Ted Cruz. I don't know how to translate that. But anyway, it's interesting that John Cornyn made it clear this month in Texas Monthly that he planned on being less confrontational with Barack Obama in the last 2 years of his administration than he has up to this date. Cornyn hasn't been confrontational at all. He's living proof that these guys, he's the second leader of the Republicans in the Senate, was a joke. They're cheerleaders. They're not leaders. They're cheerleaders. And it just goes to show that office of being a minority whip is more important to him than the interests of his constituents here in Texas.
Well, yeah, we have the same problem in South Carolina with Lindsey Graham, and of course he has primary challengers too, and hopefully we're going to get rid of that rhino here in South Carolina. But the problem is you've got the establishment Republicans, and of course you've got the Chamber of Commerce and Karl Rove and all of the establishment crowd. Instead of embracing the base and the conservatives who really want to do something and change government and actually reduce the size and scope and power of the federal government, you have these establishment types who are just perfectly happy to keep the status quo, keep the power in Washington, because that keeps them in power and keeps their campaign coffers full. So it seems crazy that the people who actually gave John Boehner a majority in the House in 2010 are the ones that the establishment Republicans decide they want to attack.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. What's your thoughts? What's going to happen? What's 2014 going to look like?
Well, I honestly think that we're going to see some serious changes in 2014. I hope we see some of these establishment types, like Lindsey Graham, lose their seats and get some real constitutional conservatives in the Senate, and maybe they can join with Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Rand Paul and Marco Rubio and others, and actually make some changes, and hopefully Mitch McConnell will lose his primary in Kentucky, and maybe we can change leadership as well. And if we do that, then I see some hope for 2014 and moving forward and actually stopping the Obama agenda. And then, of course, it's going to be important what we do in 2016, but again, it has to be constitutional conservatives. We've got to defeat these rhinos that just go along to get along.
Yeah, I kind of believe the rhinos are worse than the Democrats, because at least the Democrats are authentic. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They're socialists, they're Marxists, they're crazy nut jobs, and they're pretty darn proud of it. Meanwhile, the Republicans, these rhinos, sit there and they passively criticizing it and say we would do things differently. We would take the slow road to totalitarianism, not the fast track you guys are taking. And they wonder why it doesn't resonate, and they wonder why it doesn't catch on with the American people. Who can get excited about a message like that, Tony Powers?
Well, absolutely nobody, and that's why we saw losses in 2008 and in 2012, and that's why it's so important that conservatives do stand up and don't sit this election out and get involved and get out into the streets and support these constitutional conservatives and do everything they can to make a change in 2014, because I really don't believe we have too many election cycles left until socialism just takes over the country.
Oh, yeah.
So it's now or never.
Yeah, and of course, you say that. I think we're already socialistic. What's the difference between us and Northern European countries? Our price, the amount of money we pay per person for welfare is higher than Northern European countries.
Oh,
so,
well,
and now we got cradle-to-grave health care. What's the difference between us and the socialist countries?
Oh, well, we're well on our way, and I don't know if you saw the report just the other day, but we're now ranked number 12th in economic freedom in the world. We've gone from number 5 to number 12 in the 5 short years that Barack Obama has been president. So we're well on our way to full-fledged socialism. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think the private sector still has a chance, but if we don't do something now, it's going to be the tipping point in 2014 if the Democrats control the Senate again. I think Obama's just going to have his way for the next 3 years, and there'll be no turning back.
Yeah, Sigmund Kramer, my producer, and I, we kind of blew it. We need to get this disclaimer made. Please remove all sharp objects before we begin this segment, because this is one of those depressing ones. But I tell you, you know what? You need a little bit of kick in a derriere to realize that we're not talking about fiction here, and we're not talking, you know, I can't believe how conspiratorial I've become, but the reality is that reality has become pretty darn scary in the last few years, Tony. Well,
you know, I'd like to leave it on a good note. I'm looking at the polls and looking at people. Yesterday there was a poll out. A plurality of Americans actually feel government is the biggest problem that we face. So I think the American people are beginning to wake up, and I do have hope for 2014, and I think we're going to see a turnaround here. But we've got to get active. We've got to get out there and do it. And if we can do this in 2014, I feel positive going forward. It's just we've got to get these rhinos and these establishment types out of the Republican Party. And then we've got to stop Barack Obama and his agenda over the next 2 years and make him a true lame duck. If we can do that, I think we can save our country.
Well, I love your optimism. I really do. Tony Powers, you're a great American. Thanks for being with us. italkus.com. That's where you go to get great commentary, great information, not only from him, but an excellent list of other personalities. Thanks for being a part of our program.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thank you, and look forward to having you on later today.
Yeah, always do. I'm Kevin Price. When we come back, much more for you. I do want to remind you, best content here shows up over there at usdailyreview.com. While there, like it on Facebook. Follow it on Twitter.